But yeah, one of those nuances of your district. I represent one side of Main Street, and it's a different county than on the other side, so it's unique.
That seems like that would complicate city government.
Well, it probably makes it interesting. They work real hard to blend that together. But yeah, there's a line right down Main Street.
All right, so you guys have been out of session for a while, but it seems like you haven't been out of session. You've got some rather controversial issues, shall we say, that have been deliberated. Medical marijuana being probably top of that list. But you're going to be back in session here pretty soon. Get at it again.
It is. You know, in 2020, we actually didn't hardly come out of session until about this time of the year. And then 2021 was a normal, at least, session as far as the time frame goes. And after we've been out, we're coming back, rumors, for 6 months. So it's close to January. I know that a lot of parties have worked really hard to try to get language right, try to bring all stakeholders to the table. Legislation is not easy. That's one of the things that you learn quickly. But still no definitive word on that, but I know there's a lot of work going into it.
Yeah, Senator Blackwell, of course, on the Senate side, representing your chamber, and Representative Lee Yancey on the House side have been running point.
Yes.
On this deal, and I know they've worked quite a bit on that. They've been working the overtime, burning the midnight oil, as they say, far and above just the typical kind of agenda and work route for a member of the House or Senate.
It is, and it's impactful legislation. Anytime it impacts people's health or concerns, it impacts employment. It touches law enforcement. There's a lot of discussion in the last couple of weeks with law enforcement. And, on that note, as the laws change, we have to evolve how we deal with things, and there's certain things with law enforcement. There's going to be some training aspects involved with this. Medical cannabis comes into play. It changes your probable cause standards. It changes a lot of things that happen in the courtroom. So I understand the concerns that are there, but we're all going to have to step up and educate ourselves and try to figure out how we deal with this, from law enforcement to education to employment, because I think it's going to be concerning across the board, just how it's implemented. It's going to be difficult.
It seems like, though, Senator, that given that this has been achieved and implemented in a number of other states, we've got a template, and we've got some degree of guidance there. And I know when we were setting the lottery up, we talked to states that could tell us these are the things you don't want to do.
Right.
And frankly, in the crafting of the Alice G. Clark Lottery Act, I'm just using that as an example, we relied quite a bit. What did you like? What didn't you like from those states that had been through this process? Wouldn't that apply to some extent, you think, in medical marijuana as well?
Oh, I think very much so, and I think that has been guidance, and we've looked, our neighbor even to Alabama did something, and I don't know that would be acceptable here, what they did. It was so restrictive, and then you have plans out of other states. I think that's been some of the great debate, is there's so much information out there. People say, well, do the exact plan that makes me happy. Yeah. Well, that's probably not going to happen. It doesn't happen often in legislation. So it may be that we've gotten, too deep into the weeds on that. But I know they're working hard. So, I look forward to getting a remedy to it, because we got other issues in government that we need to focus on.
Do you have an opinion as to, would you like to see this get done in some way, shape, or form in a special session to kind of clear the boards and not consume the regular session?
My personal opinion, I would like for us to get it dealt with prior to session. But if it's not going to be efficient, economical, we are so close now that I think it's hard for me to advocate really hard to say, hey, we just want to be in there. I just don't want it to be combined with the typical legislative process. Yeah. And again, that's based on 2 years of experience, one of those being COVID. It just seems that it would make it more difficult.
Yeah, I understand. All right, so what else are what else is on your board, I guess, as priorities for the upcoming session?
You know, the first thing that probably jumps out is the amount of money that we have that will be waiting on us. $1.8 billion from the federal government. We have $1 billion in excess that we had over revenue projections for the prior fiscal year.
Yep.
And the first quarter, we were over about $250 million more. So we're in a very unique position as it relates to money in the bank. But then I think it's a greater job to be a steward when you have more money. If you don't have any money, it's not hard to be a good steward because you just don't have it to spend.
Nothing to manage.
That's correct. And so I think a lot of the time that's going to be spent is going to be focused on that. Now, of course, with the Recovery Act funds, as I understand it, reading the interim final rule, which within itself is an oxymoron. It's interim, so it's not permanent.
Yep.
But yet the next word's final. And then it's a rule, which means we got to follow it. I know our mayors and our supervisors and everybody, they're trying to figure out what to do with their money the same way as the state is. But, you know, we're wanting to see projects with this money that's been sent down that are transformational to the state of Mississippi, in the communities and in the cities. So I think it's going to take up a lot of our time. But according to the rules, I understand we have 4 years to obligate the money, 6 years to spend it. And in the inflationary environment we're in right now, I'm very thankful revenues are up, but as you well know, if inflationary pressures are such that it increases the cost of goods we bought last year, you're going to have more money to buy the same things in the coming year, and where we're going to end up with fuel costs, labor costs, et cetera, across the board.
Yeah. Well, and the lieutenant governor has made it clear that his approach is to invest that big pot of money in what he would call more long-term sorts of objects as opposed to short-term. And, I'm for that as well. I will say this. I get concerned about recurring sorts of expenses being committed to with one-time money. And I haven't really looked at what the big list of possibilities are. But that's always a concern. And sometimes, you can go spend money on things that are so-called transformational and are long-term investments. But it comes with that are long-term expenses as well to maintain some of those investments. And so we've got to make sure that that's carved out. Is that kind of the instructions you're getting from the lieutenant governor there?
It is. And we talked about this early on, and I have tried to meet, and he came to Alcorn County, just neighboring to us, and we invited, 5, 6, 7 counties of mayors and supervisors to come and to try to educate and try to say those things. I've met with the state auditor's office. I've met with them to say, hey, what do you say we can do with this? It's very clear that water, sewer, and broadband are the 3 big-ticket items that can be used. As we know, the rules can change. There may be some things that come along different to that. But we do have water systems and sewer systems, particularly those supported in rural areas, are water associations, which brings a completely different issue to the table because they're not governmental units.
Yeah, I've just had Brandon Presley, the commissioner from your district, talking about that.
That's correct.
So there are some restrictions, of course, as we've talked about, and you guys got to work within those parameters. Honestly, I'm not sure you can spend all that money on some of that stuff. That is an issue. It truly is.
Well, I think that, and based on my initial conversations with a lot of the water associations, if we're able to find a way, because you've got some constitutional provisions you got to deal with because they're not governmental entities, there's long-term impact that you can make in that arena.
Let's talk some after the break. You stay around?
Yeah,
we got Senator Daniel Sparks in the studio. We'll talk some more here on. I got to tell you, it's customary for me anytime I'm traveling down to towards Mobile, approaching it. You go through Wilmer, Alabama. Yes. It always makes me think of Wilbur. All right, so we got Senator Daniel Sparks here in the studio. So, Senator, we have Jason, who texted in, wants to know if any of the money that would be from the American Rescue Plan, $1.8 billion to the state, that gets then allocated by the state under the authority of the state. And then you've got money that went directly to counties and cities. We talked about that extensively here on the program. The question is, can any of those dollars be used to fix this question, bridges in Tishomingo and Prentiss counties that have been barricaded for several years, there's some restrictions on the use of the money.
There is, and that's one of the things is I met with folks in Tishomingo County, invited the mayors and supervisors and folks to a meeting, doing the same thing in Etowah, try to do the same thing in Prentiss. Not that I'm an expert in any way on the Recovery Act funds, but there's FAQs or frequently asked questions, and there's guidelines in this interim final rule. Right now, there are permissible uses, the primary of which are water, sewer, broadband, not infrastructure. Of course, you got to look at the federal government. They're the ones that sent this money.
Right.
They want to send you an infrastructure bill.
Yep.
And they want to send you a spending bill, and they don't want to give you the infrastructure bill to fix these roads and bridges.
That's right.
Unless you agree to their outlandish spending bill, and that's the battle we see. And here we are in Tishomingo County, as is stated by the caller, the texter, that we have bridges that are closed. But to further answer that question, we have 4 years to obligate this money, and I know that the Lieutenant Governor appointed a committee out of appropriations. I'm on the finance side of the aisle, chaired by Senator Polk, and they will be looking at a lot of these issues and talking with legal. But there is a loss calculation. All these documents are available online if people want to, seek them out, the frequently asked questions and things. But there is a loss calculation. For those 4 years, you're allowed a 4% growth factor. And that if you show you have a loss as a state or as a county or as a city, it opens it up for flexibility to spend that money. So in the long run, there may be some money that is allowable to be spent on these things. But out of the gate, there were pretty strong restrictions. But to answer directly, at this time, no, you cannot use it directly for infrastructure unless you've done the loss calculation and you show that you have lost a certain amount of revenue from the base year.
That's right, as a replacement essentially for that. So you got to believe there was some sausage-making politics behind the scenes when they came up with this list of qualified expenses or things that it could be spent on, this money that's been allocated.
That's right. I don't think there's any question. And there are needs across the state for water, sewer. Now, broadband has fallen into a unique situation. You had the Public Service Commissioner on earlier today.
Yep.
There is concern anytime that you intervene in the free market. But TVA, power to my part of the world, the rural world, was market intervention.
Yep.
Broadband, to a great degree, has been market intervention.
From a rural perspective.
From a rural perspective, and that's what I represent, a rural district. So there are times that when people want to say free market, free market, free market, they're screaming that from the downtown urban center that's had 6 internet providers for the last decade, and I still personally, and I'm waiting on Tishomingo Connect. And they're soon. They actually pulled the fiber across the lake in front of the house a couple of weeks ago. But I don't have internet at my home where I live. So
for me, Senator, it's about, if we're going to use public money to provision this, what's the return to the taxpayers on this? And it's no different than any other investment in so-called infrastructure or research or R&D or innovation that public funds may be used for. It's the same value proposition that has to be asked.
It is, and we do have to remember when we talk about government intervention, and I at some point maybe we can talk a little bit about the vaccine mandates and things that are going on, but when we talk about government intervention, we were already collecting fees, rural subscriber fees, things of that nature. The money that is discussed, this this $100 million that came to the state of Mississippi, that was money that was going to go to somebody. It went to our broadbands this time instead of going to one of the larger conglomerates who have been getting that money for years to deliver at one time rural telephone.
That's the problem, though, it's one time.
And so that's the build-out money. And so I don't think particularly, even though I don't like to intervene in the market, the government already was intervened in that market. And so we've actually taken it, we've localized it, which we like to do as conservatives. We believe local rule is best. And I can assure you, I firmly believe the folks at Tishomingo Power and Prentiss Power and Tom Bibby Electric are responsive to our needs for electrical services. They're out there in the middle of the storm trying to restore service. They're going to treat you with the same courtity when you have an internet problem.
Well,
I'm excited for local service.
It's a different model, something I have a little experience with, and so it's like supporting a power infrastructure, an electrical grid. It's a 7/24 environment, and it takes different kinds of people to support all that stuff. I don't know what their plan is for that and how they're approaching it. But the question is, again, what's the value? What's the return to the taxpayers? And if that's there, it's something you can get on board. You're absolutely right, though. USDA has had grants for this purpose for quite some time.
And I
rural
think
broadband.
That's right. And the return on investment is we have an environment now where we're going to see more work at home. We're seeing jobs come to an area, high-precision jobs, high-precision farming. You go crawl into a piece of equipment right now into the farming industry, and it's got to be GPS guided,
no question.
Or that's where we're at. Education, we saw it with the shutdown during the COVID situation. So I do believe there's a return on investment. I do recognize, and I'm honest enough to say, that's government intervention.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an issue. All right, so the vaccine mandates, well, I'm happy to talk about that. In fact, the Biden administration, OSHA, Department of Labor, promulgated the rules today.
And that's kind of the key point, because I've had a lot of questions on this from people working for private employers and things of that nature. The Biden administration stepped out and verbalized that they wanted this to happen, and they told private business that you must do this if you have more than 100 employees. And then everybody said, well, that's an executive order. It's law. Well, no, it's not. Then he told an agency to go promulgate a rule.
Yeah.
And that's how we operate in this country, unfortunately. It's not always the people you elect that have impact on it. It is the agencies that are given the guidance and told what to do that can get politicized. And in this particular situation, the vaccine is available. If people feel in consultation with their physician that that's their best way to protect themselves, they should be able to do that. I also believe a private employer has the right to set boundaries for employment.
Yep.
And I think that we have to be careful there. But there's a difference. When the federal government orders a private business to order their employees to do something, that, in my opinion, is overreach of the federal government. Then, if you back away and say, well, OSHA's doing it, well, they're getting cute is what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're doing it through an emergency rule. They're not going through the normal circumstances. And our universities, colleges, our industries are capitulating.
Yep.
Now, they're going to come back to us on something in the future, because if you lay down for this, there'll be something else in the future they'll say is necessary, and they'll be coming to the state legislature saying, defend us.
Yeah.
Push back on this. But here's the other thing that I want to make clear. I don't want to interfere with private businesses' rights as it relates to their employees, but it is not an arm's length transaction right now. Legally, the federal government has leaned on anyone who gets federal money, and they have said, this is what you must do. And so they have, for the future of their economic interest across the state, they've told their employees, you must do this. So the challenges are out there. The legal challenges are out there. I think the state of Mississippi will join in that. I think it's proper. I think it's a proper pushback. And that's not being anti-vaccine. It is being anti-Washington centralized federal government telling you what you're going to do in your local jurisdiction because you receive some type of federal money. It is a dangerous precedent to set that we would allow them to have that much intervention in business, and then for business to say, we had to do it because the federal government said so. At this point, when you have a government agent, they can't do things that are unconstitutional. If law enforcement uses a citizen to violate the Fourth Amendment, they can't say, oh, well, they were not a government agent. You become a government agent. The federal government has forced these private businesses to become a government agent, which I think is a violation. I think it's a violation of the workers.
I'm in the same camp. I support the right of a private business if they want to implement such requirements for employment. So be it. The market will sort that out.
That's correct.
They'll find out, hey, I can't get anybody to work.
That's right.
Or I lose so many people, it starts costing me money. It'll sort that out. The dangling of the federal carrot is problematic for me, though, to federal contractors even. I think that maybe crosses the line in terms of use of public money. But I appreciate you coming on, Senator. Always a pleasure, sir.
Thank you so much. Look forward to being with you during the session.
You got it. We got Senator Daniel Sparks has been our guest in the last segment. We'll take a break right